Ms. Brown, let's read this ordinance into the record, please, and I'm going to ask Mr. Knight or someone from staff to comment on it.
Yes, Mayor. An ordinance of the City of Winter Park, Florida, amending Section 18-45 of the Code of Ordinances to allow the city manager to make special exception for dogs to be in Central Park and other prohibited park areas for specific events, providing for severability, codification, conflicts, and an effective date.
On first reading, Mr. Holland. Or Mr. Knight, I don't know who wants to start. I saw you both step up.
You said you had a
I'm
question,
looking
but
at-
I
No,
can
no,
do-
I just thought you might want to give us a little bit of background on this.
We'll give you a little background. Currently the ordinance prohibits dogs in Central Park and in several parks. What this ordinance would do would be similar to what the commission did with the alcohol ordinance a while back, which was to give the city manager authority to waive it in certain circumstances. So this came as a request from one of the merchants along Park Avenue, and it went through the Parks and Rec Board. They unanimously recommended it. John and the city attorney put the ordinance together, based upon that request. So it's here for your consideration. We're glad to answer any questions.
Questions of the staff?
I've got one.
Mr. Mackey?
And either one, and I'm working on the Autumn Arts Festival now, and if we have a special permit or apply for one for the sale of alcohol, we are required to delineate the area that we're going to use for that. Would the same kind of delineation or a delineation of the area to be used be part of this? Because it makes it very clear where you can be and where you cannot be with holding your alcoholic beverage.
It definitely could be. I know
It's in there.
the restrictions on the alcohol ordinance are based upon the licensing of that area, the specific calling for the beer gardens and the fencing around it. But yes, we can restrict exactly where dogs will be allowed in Central Park.
It's a definition, everybody knows here's where you are.
I like it.
And it gets rid of any, it's kind of like, where's 240 or 140 feet away?
Yeah. Ms. Brown, read it to us there. if you
Sure,
see it.
Mayor.
I didn't just see it pop up.
On page 2
It
of
didn't jump out.
Page which?
Page 2 of 4 of the ordinance, if
Gotcha.
you go to paragraph 3, the applicant must identify the date or dates of the special event and the times during which the event will be held. The application will also identify the need for allowing dogs to be present during the event and will identify the specific park areas in which the event will be held and for which the presence of dogs is requested.
Commissioner Mack, and I mean, you're not an expert at this, you just happen to volunteer at the Arts Festival, so maybe my question would be to Mr. Knight, though you might know too. The fencing, which I know people do, other than, for example, I didn't mean to say that. There is a fencing that goes up. I mean, it's really nice, like picket fencing, at least in the 2 arts festivals that I'm familiar with. Now, we have other events such as, we have other events where people bring their own wine to listen to concerts and all. Is that goes through a waiver? That may or may not be fenced. Is the fencing something that just people do because from an alcohol standpoint, it's safer to make sure that people that we're serving don't leave the spot really for their own protection?
Right.
Or is that something that the city requires to be done? That's my question.
That's for sale of alcohol.
You know,
Essentially,
we
you're
actually,
charging so you can't walk through there.
we actually have to put up a fence.
But that's because of our ordinances, not because of the person who's selling it.
Correct.
That is correct.
So, I mean, would we potentially ask for the same thing in this, or?
That was not the intent of my,
Oh, that wasn't your intent, your question, I'm just asking it as a second question.
We could, it might be a little more difficult because it could be a larger area.
And in some cases, I've seen areas that are really just roped off. I mean, it's just a delineation of some kind.
Let me ask a question which came to me through all of this process, and then I'm assuming that any dog that is for handicap support, seeing eye or whatever is already exempted
That's
from
correct.
all of this. I wanted to be clear on that. Other questions of the commission? Commissioner Sprinkle?
Right now, if we have something that has those blow up things in the park, or we have something that has a car parked in the park because it's a car show or something like that, what process do those people go through to get permission to put that stuff in the park?
We have the special events permit they use, and it's routed through all the departments, and that's how that approval takes place.
Okay, so we don't ever see that stuff. here.
In the, like, the first years that the Concourse de Elegance, for example,
Right.
came up, the commission approved that event, because it was a departure from our norm of what we do, but as it became a recurring event, the commission said we don't need to see that anymore. If somebody's doing something that major, we would bring it to the commission, but if somebody's just renting part of the park, we have park rental rules already in place that goes through the parks.
Major park events go through the Parks and Recreation Board for approval.
So I think her question is very specific.
Well, I
Do
was,
you approve the things that go, I mean, the
yeah, I wanna know
decorations or
who's in
the?
charge, are you, so basically what we're asking in this one is to give you the job of deciding whether or not dogs can go in the park. That's what we're asking.
Right.
And, or that's what this recommendation is, that's correct, right?
Correct.
We're saying that if there was an opportunity to have a party or whatever you wanna have in the park and dogs were allowed, because there's this thing going around that we're gonna open up all the parks to dogs, okay? That's what the public out there is hearing, and that's what we're gonna have covered on the news, okay? So I wanna be really careful about this, because I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, in favor of doing that. And I would only be in favor of doing one event. So because of that, I'm not sure that I want this, in fact, I'm sure I don't want this, okay? I don't want this because I'm giving you the job that I've had previously, okay? And so I don't want to put dogs in the park, and I'm sure that you would be very, very judicious in when you decided to put them there, but they're not gonna call you, they're gonna call me. And so I'd like to be able to have an event for dogs in the park in a very select area at a very select time with whoever wants to be in charge of that, but I'm not in favor of giving you my job. And that's how I feel about this.
And Commissioner, that's a great question, except the role of governance versus management is probably different. And so
That's
I
right.
guess my question would be, you know, if an ordinance, to me, even for the alcohol ordinance, I mean, if Randy says every Sunday is allowed in the park because this is okay, and he gives an exemption, I'm not sure that's a good thing. So I don't know if in our ordinances that grant the city manager the opportunity to have the opportunity to make decisions, which by the way I support, because he's our city manager, you know, if there should be some limitation on how often he can grant an exemption, how, you know, I don't know if he wants that or not, but Mr. Knight, and then Mr. Larry.
I just want to point out, because you raised a great point, Commissioner Sprinkle, that the existing ordinance doesn't even allow the commission to waive it.
Right.
And so you could just as easily substitute city commission can waive versus city manager can waive, and it would still come to this board to do. Currently, even the commission can't waive it under the existing ordinance, it's just absolutely prohibited.
So we could throw the ordinance out and start over, but we can't waive our ordinance.
Right, that's correct. You could amend it to allow for a waiver process. Right now, it just is prohibited. And so they could just as easily come back to the commission, or you could do what you said, you could limit it to 2 events a year or some other limited amount of time. So there are other options other than turning it over to the.
And Commissioner, I don't know that you want to spend commission meeting time going over every waiver that's potential in the park. I don't know. I mean, you might for dogs and not for something else. That is why we have an advisory board, and that is why we have a city manager. Hopefully, those things work. You're right. I mean, we get all the blame and none of the credit. But that's
Yeah.
just why we signed up for these $2,400.
But I can't support this, okay? So if we're trying to get to a place that I can support it, I can't support it like it is today or tonight. So I needed to be able to put more controls on it because I am the one that's gonna run for election. And because of that, I mean, I understand the dog deal. I mean, I got the rabies shots when I was a kid. I know all about what it's like to have your palms sweat when you hear a dog bark. I also own a dog now, thanks to Brian, and I actually like him. So, you know.
Brian or the dog?
But I actually like the dog because, you know, he gets so excited when George comes home. It's really fun to watch. So anyway, I'm okay with that, but I don't want to just open it up. And I feel like we're going from a place where we said no dogs at all, just like you said about the beginning of when we had the cars in the park. In the very beginning, that came to us, and we owned it. And I'm just not ready to give this away.
Commissioner Cooper.
I actually have some technical questions about the language, and then I'd like to talk to what we're considering doing.
Why don't you talk about what we're doing first, and then we'll talk about the language? 'Cause
Mr. Mayor,
good to hear
please
that-
don't be rude. We just sat here and Sarah just talked on, and it was okay with you. And now as soon as I start to speak, you're shutting me down. Please don't do that. I'm going to talk to two things. The first I'm going to do is to ask about some of the technical aspects of this law, and then I would like to talk in general about what we're considering doing. In the ordinance as it's written, it says that permission will be granted if the requirements set out in the section are met. And the only requirements in the section are that the applicant tell you where they're gonna do it, when they're gonna do it, and they assure you that they're gonna clean it. And then if you go to the next page of the ordinance, it actually strengthens the language and says that it shall be. On number 6, it said, if these required conditions are found by the city manager to be satisfied, and understand this is in advance of doing anything, he shall issue a written waiver. And my concern is, I think this language might box him into not being able to use his discretion. And that was my concern. So whatever we do, whatever we end up with as a group, I want to make sure that we truly have legal discretion for you to say no if you think it's a bad idea. So that would be my thought if we move forward with something similar to this. And then the
What is
next,
the city attorney's perspective on the legal aspect of it?
that's what I was
Was he
asking.
being rude to you? I'm just,
No, he wasn't.
just questioning.
Cut it off.
So does the city attorney review this or not? I did.
They asked me to come up with an ordinance that would allow for Mr. Knight to permit dogs for special events. And I wrote this and provided it to them, and they liked it, and they put it in the agenda. We can certainly tweak it. And if I could respond to the commissioner's technical point. First of all, the group that asked for this permission, it says in paragraph 2 on page 2 of 4, they have to demonstrate in the application, and that means demonstrate to the city manager's satisfaction, or if we change it, it would be to the commission's satisfaction, that the event will be in conformance with all requirements of the code and other applicable laws. So when they hold special events in the parks, there's a process, insurance is required, and there are other code provisions currently that basically require certain standards to be adhered to. Provision for removing garbage, provision for security, provision for bathrooms, that's already in your code. So they have to meet that threshold, and they have to give Mr. Knight the application 30 days before the schedule starts, specifying the need for the dogs, the area in the park where they're asking for permission. Unless they get a special permission, Mr. Knight has authority to be, to exercise more discretion over the dogs, have to be maintained on leash. They have to keep the premises clean, both during and after the event, using appropriate plastic bags for cleaning. Yeah. And
The
then,
question is, can he say no if he doesn't want to allow?
and the answer is, if they've satisfied him, he could say, no, you haven't satisfied me, that you have provision in place. He could determine, for example, they don't have the financial capability to fulfill these obligations. But then, most importantly, if you look at page 3 of 4, it says, the city manager may add any other appropriate condition within his discretion that he determines will promote the
Well, I
public
saw that, it
interest.
just didn't say he could turn it down, it said he could put conditions on it, but he can't turn it down.
So, for example, it's the first year this group's coming in, they don't have a track record of demonstrating reliability. He would say, I need you to post a bond as a condition so that if you don't clean up, we can hire people at your expense.
So you can't say no. like he's-
No, but they may say, we don't have the bonding capacity.
You make it difficult, but you can't say no.
Well, we don't ever want to make anything difficult for the sake of it. I mean,
No,
only
I'm
if he's
saying-
legitimately,
But I'm just asking.
Well, I don't know if that's
Say no,
accurate. I mean, I think if you give somebody the discretion, they can say no. They don't have to give a reason for
But he
that.
doesn't have the discretion.
you can
to say no.
exercise discretion in good faith.
He has the discretion to put conditions on.
So the city manager, for an instance like this, and I'm sorry, Commissioner, if I take the floor for a second. If the city manager says, we're not, the last episode didn't go well, the last event didn't go well, we're gonna limit this to 5 dogs. you can put that condition on, and
Yes.
if that doesn't make sense for the owner.
Or if he said it didn't go well, I'm not gonna approve it, you
Yeah.
can do that too.
Okay.
So I think that discretion in this ordinance is discretion.
So Larry, I'm
I
sorry.
You
agree
may
with that
disagree
last-
with it, but I think it's discretion.
I agree with the mayor's comment because the thing, the ordinance is clear that Mr. Knight has to be satisfied that they're gonna meet these conditions, and if they have a bad track record, then he's not satisfied.
It would just be like with our alcohol ordinance, that if somebody came every week and said, I wanna have a sale of wine in the park, he might say, well, we've had 3, and that's enough.
Could I ask a
Commissioner
question?
McMaster.
If, Larry or Randy, taking that, if someone came to us right now and said, I'm having an event in the park and I want to sell alcohol, and they met all the requirements for selling alcohol, can you still say no?
I think it's in,
Is it
I have-
ultimately a discretionary?
that ordinance, I understand your question, that ordinance was in place when I got here, and I don't know how it's implemented in fact. I mean, does it give you the complete unbridled discretion to?
It's worded very similar to this.
Discretion, which means he has discretion, which means he's smart enough to not do it all the time, and he's smart enough to do it occasionally, I guess. I mean, that's what discretion does, otherwise it's never.
That is my
You know,
intent, in the way it's written.
if the attorney is comfortable, I'm comfortable. Just when I read it, it said discretion only applied to adding conditions, not to saying no. And that's what I wanted to make sure we're comfortable
No,
with.
Commissioner, let me say this. This is just what I came up with without any input. I'm totally open to suggestions. For example, I think if you want, it's a policy decision, but if you want to tell the city manager he can only approve this X number of times per year maximum, that's a policy decision. That's a
Can we
legitimate-
leave that language ambiguous? Can we leave it? I don't wanna do this on the dice, but I'm kind of forced to. Can we put language in there that says, giving the city manager discretion as to how many events he believes will be, will be fine this year?
Yes, I could easily.
You have to put in a number.
No, I could come back on second reading and put in language that one of the factors guiding the city manager's discretion will be the number of previously approved waivers.
But that's not discretion, Larry. I mean, at some point, the city manager, whatever that might be, I mean, if you're gonna make it so specific, then I don't consider that discretion. I consider that specific.
A policy decision for this commission. You tell me what you'd like to put it in.
So the question which was being asked technically was, does this give him the discretion to approve or disapprove, yes or no?
The answer is yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooper, you still have the floor.
If the attorney is comfortable that Randy can disapprove this at his discretion, then I am comfortable with the technical aspects of that. I just had to ask the question. On a larger scale, my concern is, we have 298 acres of parks. We have 17 acres of off-leash parks. And I think dogs are allowed in most all of our parks on leash.
All parks.
Except for Central Park.
Correct.
And I had the privilege, and I know every one of you has had the same opportunity, to go and introduce one of our popcorn flicks. And it's a great and wonderful thing to watch. And the little kids spin and laugh and run and fall and roll in the grass, and the teenagers lay on the blankets in the grass in front of us. And I just think that it's okay for us as a community to say, there are 6 acres, is that what Central Park is? May not even be that much. How much is Central Park? 6
I believe it's
acres.
7 acres.
Is there 7 acres out of 298 acres where we would like to say this area is designated for sitting on the ground, enjoying concerts, laying on the ground, watching movies, and we have chosen this time to leave our dogs at home. I have a dog, I'm crazy about my dogs, but I will tell you that like Sarah, my youngest daughter is was terrified of dogs. Not because there was some mean, aggressive dog, but because there was a large dog in a public area that ran to play and love her and knocked her over and terrified her for years. And I just think that it's okay for us to say this 7 acres is gonna be for recreational activity of people without their dogs for an evening to sit doing. So I won't be supporting this. On the other hand, what I would love to support is, I don't know if there are restrictions against moving huge groups of merchandise and tents into Fleet People's Park and selling merchandise there. I have no problem whatsoever with the event. I don't mind it in the street, I don't mind putting a raised area, bandstand, in the street so that you have that opportunity. I don't mind anything that goes on with people's relative to sales, and I just think it's okay to say Central Park is different. And so that's sort of where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments?
I don't have a problem with this. My only problem, my concern is follow-up. I want to make sure that the park is pristine after the event is over. I've walked through that park early in the morning, and it's not sometimes because, heck, in my front yard, people get up and walk their dog at 5 o'clock in the morning. My front yard is not pristine. So I'm afraid also that the folks hosting this will be blamed if someone comes at 5 o'clock the next morning in Central Park and does their business. I'd certainly like the ability for the city to make sure after the event is over that it's clean. And I'd like some follow-up check. Because again, you're gonna get the call the next morning if someone steps in something and it may have been clean the night before. I love giving the opportunity for people to try things out. We've done that before. We listened to a CNL proposal for a gigantic parking garage, and we went back and asked them to come back. I'm certainly open to hearing and giving people a little bit of latitude to hear proposals. So I'll support this, but I certainly want the city to check up, work with the host of the event once it's over to make sure that it's clean, spotless. Because again, Brian, I'm afraid if something happens that next morning, you're gonna get the fallout from that, and I don't wanna see that happen. So, Randy, if we can make sure that happens, it's just one of me here, but I certainly like to make sure that's.
And Commissioner Lear, I think that applies to any event in the park. I mean, I think that, you know,
It may
we
take
can have
a little-
garbage after the arts festival, we can have oil leak after the car show, we can do all kinds of things.
Mr. Mayor, I think that if someone
Yeah.
drops a cup, you can see that from 4
You're right.
feet away.
That's right.
If I
Stepping in a cup
you
is
may
not
be on top of it.
You know,
Commissioner
and-
Mackin
and-
is the floor.
And I think many of us have received emails and discussions about this. And I would be more in support of it if we identified, because it is a trial, if we identified 2 events, something. Because I think the perception is that we are going to have a dog event every weekend in Central Park on stage. That's by virtue of what I've gotten from feedback, is that is what's being perceived, is that we are opening the door and there's going to be a dog event in Central Park every weekend. I do not believe that's the case.
I don't either. Can we
I would be,
allow the
I
city
would,
manager?
I would be, well, I think,
Don't you think he's hearing us though?
I think he's hearing us, but I think other people have to hear that as well, Steve. And if this were, one of the reasons I ask is there a delineation, and it can be as simple as an area that's gonna be fenced off, it's roped off. And so if someone is afraid of dogs, they instantly recognize an area, there's something happening there, there's a delineation, I don't have to go in there, that's fine, it's like walking on a football field, you don't do that in the middle of a football game, there's a delineation that says there's something else going on here. If it were limited to 2 events a year, and we had some kind of delineation, in other words, I'd like to see this tightened up just a bit, I could go there. I'm not I'd like to see this tightened up, and I think that will alleviate a lot of the questions and comments I'm getting, and perhaps the misperceptions, because, again, it's gonna happen, the city makes everybody return things to as close to a pristine condition as possible after an event. I've been involved in events with the Arts Festival many, many years, and we work hard to put everything back in order.
Commissioner Kitten, would you support, if I make a motion tonight to move this forward, but on second reading, addressing your concerns and Commissioner Sprinkle's concerns, would you be okay with that? Because I will not support it on second reading to follow your lead, because I know you'll take a step with me to move this forward tonight, if you do. And I will promise you the same step at the second reading, that if they don't address your concerns that the city manager's hearing tonight, I will not support it.
Well, I think you could, I mean, you can do 2 things tonight. I mean, you don't even need to do it in the second reading. I think you could amend it now to say exceptions would be limited to 2 per year for 2 days. Or you could say, you know, it's the purvey of the city commission and be done with it.
I would like to, because I think Commissioner Cooper raised some questions that Larry heard. I think Rainey's heard some of my concerns and some other concerns. See, I'm willing to move it forward, and if those are not addressed on the second reading, then we think you know where I'm going.
I do.
So-
And I don't want to, to the mayor's point, I don't want to make the
I don't wanna
changes
do- I don't wanna
here,
do it
rather
here.
than hearing our concerns, go back and make them.
I'm with you on that one, so.
Then, Mr.
I'm
Mayor,
looking
I'll
for-
move this
okay,
forward.
thank you.
I
Is
need
there-
to ask one more
Sorry, there's a
question.
motion on the floor. I'll let you ask this question. Is there a second to the motion? I'll move a second. Commissioner Sprinkle?
Okay, right now, is there anything else in the parks, this is a process question, that has to come to us? Does everything else just go right to you? Is there anything else that has to come to us? Because I'm not wanting to be making these decisions. We can write it in here. Is there anything else?
Yeah, there's certain street closures, if anybody wants a banner going across the road, you know, that's something that in the past we prohibited, but the commission has on
Okay.
occasion. Very, very special occasions approved that. There's a few things, you know, that are.
Okay,
And Commissioner Sprinkle, to me, what the process should be is, I think any citizen should be able to petition its government for a decision. So if Randy Knight, as our city manager, does something that somebody doesn't agree with, they'll be able to ask us, and we can say, we can override your decision, or we cannot. So that's not even inherent in this. I think it should be. I think it should be for the alcohol thing.
well, I agree with
You know,
you on both of those.
for any of these things where the city manager has discretion, I think that if the city manager, for whatever reason, if somebody, they have to be very tactful with that and thoughtful. But if a citizen says, you know what, I don't like Mr. Knight's decision, I'd like to petition my government, which is a right, I think, given to us in the Constitution, to be able to have this waiver or whatever, and it comes to us, just like we did with Palashik, we can say yes or we can say no.
How far do you want that to go on every decision the city manager makes?
Well, I don't want it, I mean, these are the decisions where he has discretion to approve something.
I don't want to go there because, and we do have that, we always have that right to, if someone is unhappy, we get a lot of people complain that there was a lot of mess in the park, that people are drunk falling down in the park. We certainly have that discretion to, during city commission meeting, talk to the city manager and
So
say.
that's the end of that one.
Yeah, I don't think that needs to be written in.
But that is, as the mayor said, that is already the case. You know, people get turned down by Jeff Riggs or George Williams.
We've had that.
We have people that, you know,
There's a waiver to use Central Park
they go
for
beyond us a lot.
a patriotic festival,
Right,
like
right.
somebody was charging something or something, I can't, because I don't remember the exact
I remember that,
circumstances.
yeah.
But I think the Parks Board, Advisory Board turned it down maybe, or maybe limited or something.
Denied fee waivers and they've come over
Yeah.
ahead to, for the people.
So as long as citizens know that, and that's not, and this
But
ordinance
that's if
doesn't
they're
prohibit
denied.
us from doing that, so.
That's if they're denied. That's if the applicant's denied.
Right.
That's just not someone coming up saying, I don't like what's going on.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, it would be the denial from an application is what I'm
Right.
saying.
So I have two issues, Mr. Mayor. One of them is that, you know, who knows who's always gonna be our city manager? I'm glad it's Randy, but what if we get somebody in there who's, you know, has 500 dogs? So you have to be really careful about who you give that decision to. The second one is, this isn't just limiting, I'm concerned that somebody next is gonna come to us and say, well, you let Brian's group in, when are you gonna let me in? So I wanna tighten
That's
this
why it's
up
discretion.
so that, but I don't want to make these decisions either. I want to tell you tonight, I'm okay with them having 2 events in the park in a designated area, which is not the entire park. A designated area that's got some kind of roped off, and even to put a period of time on it. All the things you've already got, I can do that for that kind of a period, and you're welcome to make it. But I want the number of times no more than 2. I don't want this to be something that I'm gonna be surprised in when I come down to the park and find.
Then I would ask you to, if that's what you want.
And I would like to make that
you should move
amendment.
as an amendment. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second her amendment.
Thank you.
And I'll support that, Commissioner, because we're just getting off the ground with that. I wouldn't mind seeing that right now, and if we have success, we see it's working, and we want to adjust that moving forward, I'm fine.
Thank you.
And if Randy has a giant balloon that gets blown up for alcohol sales every weekend in Central Park, or cars in every park, and at his discretion, those things don't happen, we probably ought to revisit the other ordinances where he gets discretion. Good way to start.
Yeah, and you know it's not about you.
No, I-
Okay.
I'm the one person in this room that doesn't have a dog.
You don't have a dog in this one?
I do like the Georgia Bulldogs, but that's other than that.
Oh,
That might get you in
boy.
trouble.
I do not.
Okay, there's an emotion and a second along with an amendment. Is there further commission discussion? I'm going to open the floor for public comment, and citizens wishing to speak to us about this matter are welcome to at this time. And please line up, folks, if you don't mind. Thank you.
This is where we have to use this.
Oh, no, don't. Hello, my name is Donna Grauber. I live at 300 Caroline Avenue and live in Park West condominiums. And, you know, when I heard about this event, my gut was so negative on it. I said, I really need to, when I heard about this ordinance change, I just had such a negative gut reaction that I thought, I need to come. You know, my thoughts are this: just because a business owner asks for something doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea to do it. Central Park to me is very special. I like dogs, but I like that Central Park is dog-free. I like to be able to walk there and not worry. I mean, I eat with dogs outside on Park Avenue all the time. Sometimes another dog goes by, they don't like the other dog, they're growling at each other. I'm okay with that, I live with it. But in the park, I don't want to have to deal with that. I really feel like Central Park is a special thing. And I also feel, you know, from the commission, I know I probably shouldn't be so protective, but I feel like you're opening a Pandora's box here for yourself. I mean, I don't know how you can approve this kind of event for someone and then not for someone else. And I think that Central Park is such a wonderful location that you are going to get so many requests to do, you know, like I said in an email, I'm one of the emailers, you know, you're going to get requests from the ASPCA for adoption events, and you're going to get who knows what, Doggy Olympics, whatever you're going to get. So, you know, I think that's a concern. As far as, well, all right, I understand what you said about, my other concern was people cleaning up, because I live in a condominium, we can't even make our owners clean up after their dogs. But I understand if the city's going to watch for that, then I'm okay with that. And then my only other thing was, you know, I had this scenario because I like to go and, you know, see the Orlando Philharmonic in the park, and I take my wine and my hors d'oeuvres and my friends and I meet them, and, you know, and then I had this vision of me putting my blanket down where all the dogs have kind of defecated and urinated, and that was really an off-putting thing to me. Oh, that just beeped. Okay, that's really, let me see.
Still a minute.
Oh, okay, very good.
It's a warning.
Okay, I think that is really, let's see, dog unit. That's, yeah, and then the only other point I wanted to make was about Fleet People's Park. You know, that was my thought. I was thrilled when that was named a dog park. I think that if there's dog events, that's the ideal place for a dog event, because that's where dogs are welcome and expected. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other citizens wishing to comment to us?
Mary Randall, 1000 South Kentucky Avenue, Winter Park, and that's not my first time, but I just support what Sarah Sprinkle originally said and what Carolyn Cooper originally said. And I do think, I agree with the previous speaker, we're opening a Pandora's box. I mean, this year it's going to be 2 events, and who's going to stop it from becoming 4 events next year, because 2 events wasn't enough, and I can see this just getting way out of control. I think that Central Park should be a park for the children and for the people. And sanitation is a big issue for me, and I don't like the thought of having to put a blanket down to go to an event on top of someplace where people, yes, maybe have picked up after a dog, but that doesn't mean that it's clean and sanitary. And you've got children rolling around in the grass and babies rolling around in the grass. And I think that there are some things in Winter Park that should be sacred, and Central Park is one of them that should be sacred and for the people. I think there are plenty of venues for dogs, and the Park Avenue, the restaurants being one of them, which I have no problem with. And I like dogs, and that's not an issue of not liking dogs. It's just an issue of something should be sacred. And in terms of opening it up a couple times a year for some event, I've gone down to Central Park thinking that I could walk through the park with my grandchildren and found there was a day a couple of years ago when they had the costume party for dogs or something after Halloween. And I expected to just be able to stroll through the park, and there were dogs everywhere, running everywhere. They jump on people, they jump on kids. And to think that you can restrict dogs to a certain area, I think is a little unrealistic. I don't know, unless you're gonna have a dog on a leash all the time, and these people do not have dogs on leashes all the time. So anyway, I would not like to see dogs in Central Park. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, this is on leash, this, correct, Randy? We're not saying off leash.
It's allowing,
It's
it's
on
generally on
leash,
leash.
it's on leash unless another special permission is given, and that's very limited. They have to demonstrate why it should be on leash. I mean, pardon me, off
if
leash.
you're having an agility competition or something.
Doggy obstacle course or something.
This is my first time, and I'm not gonna say, they.
If would you identify yourself, please?
And more.
Ma'am,
My
I'm
name is
sorry.
Linda Erickson,
Ma'am,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
I,
And your
born
address.
and raised here, fed the squirrels in park growing up, and to me, it is a people's park. I live off the avenue, I walk it every single day, I see the people that are constantly going through the Central Park with their dogs, and they don't follow the rules. To me, we have a rule, it says no animals in the park, it's real simple. The old Nike saying, just say no. I don't believe in making, for this particular park, making any kind of exceptions to the rule. Just keep it clean and keep it for the people. I feel like we have so many dogs on this avenue now with all the dog bowls on that part of the restaurants and dogs sitting on the chairs where people are sitting. Some actually I've seen on tables where we're eating our food. It's just, enough is enough. Keep the park for us. And just say no. Thank you.
I haven't been here in a while. This place looks really nice. Seen some changes. Bonnie Jackson, 3009 Temple Trail, Winter Park. In 2009, the Doggy Door began holding dog events on Garfield Street, directly behind the stage in Central Park. City staff approved the events, circumventing the existing ordinance prohibiting dogs in Central Park or on any street adjacent to Central Park close to vehicular traffic. In 2010, the City Commission was provided with photographs depicting dogs all over Central Park, both on leash and off leash, during these events, despite assurances by the event organizer, Brian, that dogs would be kept out of Central Park, and despite permanent signs in Central Park that no dogs are allowed, and even with city staff redirecting people. It is astonishing that the city has allowed one business owner, not a Winter Park resident, to circumvent the law since that time by drawing people onto a tiny street that borders Central Park for a large dog-centered event, I should say events, where Central Park is the only park where dogs are not allowed. Now you're considering an amendment to legalize what has been occurring illegally for several years. The same can be said of Lake Island Park, where the city has allowed a dog agility club to train and organize the events that occur on recreational fields. These are the same recreational fields where children play lacrosse, football, and soccer, and where dogs are not allowed. So exactly what is the law in Winter Park? Are we allowed to follow the ordinances that we like and disregard the ones that we don't like? Or is it just the dog-related ordinances that we can disregard? Regardless of what ordinance states today or however you choose to amend it, the more events involving dogs that are approved in Central Park will leave the impression that dogs are allowed. It is nonsense to believe that dogs are welcome one day and not the next. We tried that approach in Big People's Park. Off-leash was occurring all the time, so we have tried to appease the people breaking the ordinance by amending the ordinance and posting signs with off-leash hours. Guess what? People ignored the signs, and the city did nothing to enforce the ordinance. It became off-leash all the time, and now it has become a dog park. That is precisely what will occur in Central Park. So you either vote to allow dogs in Central Park or not. There is no in between. The Park Avenue Merchants Association boasts on its website that Central Park is the crown jewel of all parks in Winter Park. The mayor frequently refers to Central Park as the jewel, as do many other residents. People deserve one space that is just for them, a green space where people can picnic, read a book, throw a frisbee, watch a movie or jazz concert without worrying about sitting in or stepping in waste left by a dog. Please don't turn our crown jewel into a porta potty. Please protect our green space. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Nancy Schwab, and I live at 508 Hinkle Circle. And I was actually here for another purpose. I had no idea this discussion was even going on. But I really want to say that I appreciate both Commissioner Sprinkle and Commissioner Cooper's comments, because I really believe that there is a tremendous inconvenience and distraction for those of us that love Park Avenue. Even with the laws what they are, there's no size limiting the dogs that are on Park Avenue. I have actually twice tripped over this giant dog that's always sitting out in front of Luma, and the people that have the dogs have absolutely no respect for the pedestrians. And I actually was almost in an accident several times because of that. I'm very concerned about the park. I love the park. I think the park is for the people that live here and visit here. And it's hard for those that are very passionate about their dogs to realize that there are a lot of people that don't feel that way. I have an allergy to dogs. They don't want to be near the dogs for a lot of different reasons. They want their peace and quiet in beautiful Park Avenue. So I would appreciate it very much if there was actually no law that would be imposing upon the conditions that we have right now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ryan Woodside from the Doggy Door. I appreciate your time and consideration today. And just to be clear, we are asking for one Sunday afternoon on the very north end of Central Park, just around the stage area. This is perfect venue for what we would do. We would definitely restrict where dogs would be able to go in terms of having some sort of temporary barricade there. And we would put up the same signs we do for all of our events that say, thank you for not bringing your dogs into Central Park. So we do clean up after every event. We have a company called Pet Butler that's there to help with that sort of thing. I personally walk the entire downtown, not just our event area for the event. We give cleanup bags to all the event participants and anyone else there with the dog. So again, I appreciate your time and consideration, and I will accept whatever verdict you decide is best for this. So thank you very much.
Nancy Schutz, 2010 Brandywine Drive. As Mr. Holland said, he was quoted saying this is just the first step, and it may be. No matter how much you try to clean up without getting gross, there are times when you cannot clean up dog waste. What's really concerning me is I just copied from Dinky Dock a sign this big. If I was talented, I would have a picture of it, but I'm not. The sign at Dinky Dock, and it's been at other parks. Dog waste is a threat to the health of our children, degrades our city, transmits disease. Leash, curb, clean up after your dog, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so why are we putting signs at our parks saying that dog waste is a threat to the health, it degrades our city and transmits disease, but yet we are considering our sacred Central Park to say it's okay for an event? Now, if it was 5 or 6 dogs, probably not a big deal, but you're gonna have 100 dogs. 100 dogs confined to a smaller area and not the entire one section of Central Park. This makes a big difference. The number of dogs that have been at these events in the past can be 100. That's a lot of dogs, and let's face it, they gotta go. I don't know how we can relate dog waste and wine. I see lots of people drinking wine at all of our concerts. Whether it's legal or not, I don't know and I don't care. Because people come to have wine and cheese, that's just sort of what you do. We also just passed an ordinance about fine dining. But we don't want casual dining or fast food dining on the avenue. We want fine dining. We want the image of fine dining. But it's okay to have 100 dogs in Central Park. Central Park is not only for the children. I see elderly coming to all the musical things at the park with their wheelchairs and their walkers. We actually need to find a way to better serve them, being able to continue as they age, going to the concerts in the park, which is so important to them. I saw one elderly couple both walking with walkers, and I was really frightened as they crossed the street. Please, keep Central Park sacred to the people.
Joe Terranova, 151 North Virginia Avenue. I live just 2 blocks from Central Park. I don't own a dog, but I don't have any problem with this ordinance as it's been amended. The city manager has been, or if you pass the ordinance, will be designated to use his discretion about these events, and by limiting them to 2, I don't think this is a big deal. If this gets out of hand, obviously it's going to come back to a commission again. But I have no problem with it. I have no problem with allowing dogs in a small restricted area. I've heard a lot of emotional comments about dogs and how they can degrade the soil and they're bad for us. But you know, I guess I grew up in a different time. I don't think it's bad to eat dirt. I did it when I was a kid, and I'm still here, and I'm 88 years old. So I don't see anything wrong. In fact, I think we protect our kids too much, to the point that they build up no resistance to any type of disease whatsoever. So I don't have any problem with this, and I think that you ought to go ahead and pass it as you recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Other citizens wishing to speak just about this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comment. Any further commission discussion?
Got a question, and I guess it goes out to my left as much as anything. I heard, if I understood Brian correctly, he was asking essentially for one event. And my question then becomes, why are we having to create an ordinance for one event? Is it not possible just to, if there's an event requested, that I could come before us on a single basis and act on it as opposed to creating a whole new ordinance?
Just change that, instead of saying city manager, say city commissioner, you go the authority to waive it on.
I mean, I'm just, if it's a one-time deal, just once a year, I mean, it's like, yeah, exactly, it's like a conditional use, and then applicant could come to us.
It's not in the ordinance.
And that's, but it's.
We could also be asked 50 times too, so that's the downside of that.
Yeah, I'm just.
I'm not saying that we'd approve it 50 times, but I don't know if you want to hear 49 petitions to approve something in the dog, or for alcohol. So, you know, anything that becomes discretionary, I think becomes.
Well, and the comment I had too is there's a lot of discussion about waste on the grass, and there are a lot of other things using that park. Squirrels, birds,
rabbits,
raccoons,
hair,
cats.
Fertilizer park.
I hope people are bringing blankets when they go to sit in that park, because you never know where you're gonna sit them. And not to mention some of the pesticides and things that we probably have to do.
And not to mention, we don't know where anybody's shoes have been.
Yeah.
If you really want to talk about infectious disease. we have a motion with an amendment, so the clerk has the amendment. Conservative other comments?
The amendment had two, but I'd be happy to go back to one. We have to re-amend it.
We would.
I'd like to, change the amendment to one.
Second.
Well, that doesn't,
Oh, yeah, okay, so we don't do
that sure doesn't feel like discretion.
No, that doesn't.
No, but it reflects what the
Yeah.
discussion's been. And that may be all discretion that we wish to give the city manager in this condition.
Mr. Brown?
I have a suggestion. If the,
Okay.
and the way it came to you is because the way it was presented to me to draft. I mean, if you want to limit it to one essentially specific event, we could just amend the ordinance to say based upon the credibility of this one event, that's it. But I wouldn't have one time a year it has to go, because you couldn't guarantee who would get there first.
You could auction it off.
Right. So that's a policy decision if you simply want to make it specific to allow the one event. With all of the other conditions, talk with the gentleman, and I understand there's even a spray, you can spray down after the event, make that a requirement.
So we would amend this ordinance or amend the existing ordinance?
No, I would amend
That prohibits animals in the park.
that, the latter, amend the existing ordinance prohibits to allow, it would be 1845, prohibits in Central Park. We'd have to come back for first reading, yes.
Then would we have to amend an ordinance to allow the agility group to use Lake Island? Is that what I heard that we're?
They're allowed in that park.
No.
You know,
We're not allowed.
No, the agility group uses the lawn there on the Lake Island Center, but occasionally they do use an athletic field, which is one of the restricted areas in the thing, that they have been doing that since before the ordinance was done, so.
But we don't have
This
to
would
amend an
re-
ordinance to allow that, but we have to amend an ordinance to allow this? Is that what I'm hearing from?
Well, this will correct both situations.
What I'm hearing there is.
Well, no, it won't, because we've just given the city manager the ability to do this twice a year, and I'm sure they do it more than,
yeah.
how often do they do it?
Well, if the twice a year refers to all the parks instead of just the Central Park, yes, you're correct.
This doesn't touch any other park.
I think this needs some more staff work. What's the best meeting?
I didn't step in this one, folks.
Mayor, I wasn't aware of it. There's really no grandfathering.
We're gonna spend more time on this than our $150 million budget. I want the city to know that, but Mr. Brown, continue.
And I apologize.
No, please continue. That's not a comment to you. I'd like you to do it.
Very, very briefly, if staff has been essentially allowing activity to occur that violates our current ordinances, then that's not really a traditional zoning concept of grandfathering. I mean, in other words, you have to comply with the police powers the way they are. If I'm, allowed to take a particular substance in San Francisco and they change the law, I have to stop taking that substance. So it's the same thing here. So I think we really do need to sit down and figure out what's, because I wasn't aware of it.
Well, let's be clear. I mean, what you said, I don't know that it's factual, Ms. Brennan. What I mean about that is that staff is granting something that violates the law. I would be judicious in my commentary.
Or allowing it.
You certainly need to investigate that. I mean, because somebody has said it doesn't mean it's true. So we've got to be, let's understand what has and hasn't, I think, before you continue that way. Commissioner Mack? It needs to be investigated. I'd certainly trust you.
I saw Commissioner Leary ahead of me. Do you have a-
Well, I've acknowledged you, so go
Okay,
ahead,
I'm-
and then I'll
I'm-
acknowledge Commissioner Leary. Is there a second? That fails for lack of a second. Commissioner Leary?
Yeah, it's just, Brian, it's in the packet sometime. What is the date of this that you're applying for?
Sunday, October 27th.
So has it already been advertised? Got tied.
Well, I'm still okay moving this forward, as long as if things come up prior to next reading, we can always deny it then, or we can address any other concerns that come before then.
Any further commission discussion? the amendment is to 2, and then, depending on what happens with that, we'll vote up and down on
And the,
first
and
reading.
the- and the 2 times is in Central Park.
I didn't make the amendment,
No,
so I don't know what the clarity around it was.
I took that to mean in all areas prohibited. We're amending a specific code provision.
Specifically, item 7, I would have taken it that way too.
But there, so,
It's 2 times per year for all park areas where dogs are currently, or pets are currently prohibited.
which would also then take into account any agility.
That's why I need to talk to Mr. Holland about that and figure out that situation. But the ordinance, as it's been currently voted on first reading with the amendment, assuming it passes, would certainly take care of the one issue, which is the event the gentleman just spoke about for October 22nd.
So as more information comes to light, it can certainly be tabled, it could be killed at second reading, it could be killed in first reading, you know, you can do whatever you want to do. That's why we read twice, that's why we don't read once.
Okay.
Okay, you all ready to vote? Clerk will read the roll on the amendment.
Commissioner Leary,
Yes.
Commissioner Sprinkle. Yes. Commissioner Cooper,
Yes,
Commissioner McMacken.
Yes.
Mayor Bradley.
Yes, now the clerk will read the roll on the first reading of the ordinance as amended.
Commissioner Leary,
Yes.
Commissioner Sprinkle. Yes. Commissioner Cooper,
no,
Commissioner McMacken,
Yes.
Mayor Bradley.
Yes.